Ah. These are all the books I read this year. That's crazy, eh? My reading goal for this year was to read 111 books. And I have reached that goal. So yeah, I'm gonna actually rank every single one of them. And for that, I'm gonna put them in order first and organize them a bit. Okay, I have now put them all in piles and in the order of lowest rating to highest rating. So this took me like 45 minutes, but now I'm ready. This is all my fiction books. This is most of my non-fiction books, and then I have my 5-star pile over here. Disclaimer, I'm gonna do a separate video for my 5-star reads, and I'm gonna also put my non-fiction reads in a separate video. And this is gonna be a long video, obviously, but I'll try to talk, to give a few words to every single one of these and give like a really short rating, so that we're not here for too long, eh? Good morning. It is a couple days later now. I'm ready. These are the best books I read this whole year. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 books that I rated 5 stars, which is quite a lot, eh? And I read 111, so it's roughly 10%. So I present to you the top 10% and my favorite books. And some of these probably will make it on my top favorite books of all times. So let's get started. I got 5 non-fiction books, which I'm gonna show to you first. These are like roughly in order. Sometimes I can't really exactly rank them in order, but especially for non-fiction books, I find that kind of difficult. But I'll just go through them. We got Marshall B. Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication. This is, well, the thing is, this was not very much new to me. I had never read the book until this year, but the concepts I was very much familiar with, like for multiple years. But it's just, you know, the concept alone is just like 5 stars for me. This is gonna improve your communication. This is gonna, it's like a magic spell pretty much. And if you are interested in communication, if you have a job that requires you to talk to people a lot, then this is a fucking non plus ultra, and everybody will benefit from this. It's not perfect, but it is amazing nonetheless. Next up, I got a memoir, and just look at the tabs. This already says everything you need to know. What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu, an incredibly important and incredibly brave account of her like very, very fucked up, very traumatic childhood. And you know, I work in a pedagogic field, like in social work, and a first-hand account of something like this, it's just priceless. And the just the courage and the strength that it needed to write something like this, it's extremely admirable. And well, just like a very, very important book. Very tough to read, very triggering for probably almost everybody, but if you are feeling mentally stable enough to read something like this, then it's a very big recommendation. And also the cover is just beautiful. Okay, next up I got another memoir. Ich will kein In mich mehr sein by Birger Selin. I'm not sure if this has been translated into English. This is about a severely autistic young man who doesn't really have a lot of control over, over his actions. He has like erratic movements, he has autoaggressions, he is nonverbal, and for I think about 20 years of his life, everybody thought he was just, this disabled boy, and eventually his parents found out that he actually is of very impressive intellect. Like, he's kind of a genius. I don't know if he's a genius, but they wrote this with assisted writing. So his mom holds his hand, and she kind of guides him, and he like types the letters, and that's how he wrote this book. And it's from his very first writings, which are just kind of like words, to actual letters, and it's so fascinating to see a development like this and to hear what he has to say, because he never had a way to communicate with anyone, really, at least not with words, just with like very basic movements and very basic sign language. And just to hear the voice of someone who lives a life like he does, absolutely astounding. I watched a short documentary that was made about him, and it's so haunting to see what he's like as a human being, and to see what he writes. It's really, really a gigantic recommendation. If you're interested in autism or neurodivergence or disability, this is a must read. As I said, I'm not sure this has been translated, but if you know German, then you should pick this up. Next up, we got one of the 3 books that made me cry like a little bitch. Das kurze Leben der Sophie Scholl by Hermann Finke. This is also, if you're German, then you have heard of this woman and of her brother Hans Scholl. They're like the closest thing we have to like modern day folk heroes here in Germany. Oh man, I'm actually getting goosebumps just thinking about it, because it's every bigger city has like a school named after them, or like a street, or like something, but I was never really familiar with the full story. And basically they were like a resistance group called the Weiße Rose, White Rose in English, against the Nazi regime, and they were punished severely. They were sentenced to death at the age of 21, and I think her brother was 23, and there was another guy there. And just, that whole thought of knowing what is right and just like standing up for it and making it a matter that's bigger than your own life, it's just absolutely... It's just, I'm almost tearing up just like thinking about it. And frequently, if I think about this book constantly, and it constantly like gets me to the verge of tears if I think about her life and her brother's life, and the last words of her brother when he got executed at 23 were "Long live freedom, lang lebe die Freiheit," oder "Es lebe die Freiheit." And that is just, man. I was at a public beach when I read the ending of this. I think if I would have been by myself, I would have just like cried and cried and cried, because it's so important. But also, it is just a biography. So actually, I read 2 biographies, I guess. I think I said earlier I only read 1. It just feels really weird to give a rating to something like this, but it's just an amazing story in German history. And lastly, we got Soul Without Shame by Byron Brown. I already talked about this in my books that changed my life video. I got a lot of tabs. It took me a long time to read. I think I spent 3 or 4 months reading this very, very slowly. And yeah, I'm not gonna get too personal, but shame is definitely something that I have to deal with regularly. That's like some of my topics, I guess, in my life. And this book really like helped me confront it and get over some of it and just get a different view. So it's like borderline spiritual. It's kind of like within the realms of Scott Peck or Eckhart Tolle or something like that. It doesn't go into like full esotericism, but it is kind of like, I would call it a spiritual book, definitely. So let's go into the fiction, shall we? We got a wide variety of things here. First up, I rated this the lowest, Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, which is my number one favorite book of all time and my favorite writer of all time. This is the English edition, however, and I do like the German edition a lot more, to be honest. I think a lot of the magical, flowery language that Hesse uses gets lost in translation, but I still had to give this 5 stars. And it's still a really good book. It's just, it wouldn't be my favorite book if I just knew the English version, though. We got a Murakami in the top 5. Norwegian Wood. His most famous book, the book that made him famous, but also a book which isn't really super representative of his style, but one of his earliest works. I just love a good tragic love story. This was actually kind of a surprise for me because I gave like very good ratings to a lot of romance books, and my top 1 book, which you probably already saw on the stack, is also a romance. And yeah, I love the cover because it just looks like trees, but also it kind of looks like 3 people casting shadows, like their legs. It's just such a good book. Like this like sad, cozy Japanese fiction, very much similar to Banana Yoshimoto, who's also one of my favorite authors. Yeah, I think I'm not gonna say more because it's such a famous book, and I would like to keep this video not like super duper long. Next up, we got The NeverEnding Story by Michael Ende. And man, Michael Ende is just, I don't even have the words for it. He is technically a children's book author. He did write some adult stories too, and this I would definitely say is a children's book. And it's kind of a book within a book. It's just so creative, It kind of it's about a boy finding a book, which is this book, like with this cover and gray, and he kind of goes into it, and it has the writing in red for the stuff that happens in the real world, and writing in green for stuff that happens in the book. And it's so cool to have it printed like that. It has beautiful art. This is a bit more bland than the other ones, but yeah, like this, for every letter it has 1 chapter. Fascinating effect is that when you read it for a while, then you don't even see the green anymore, it just looks normal. And then you read the red text and it looks really weird. It's just kind of like basically just a children's fantasy story, but it is so unique. It doesn't really use any of the common tropes in fantasy or in children's stories even. Like, I don't know, like, I don't remember everything, but it has like this lion that constantly changes shape and colors, and it has like such weird and the most original characters I have ever read in my life, to be honest. And also it has such depth for a children's book. The main character, who is a child himself, the amount of transformation that he goes through is like unheard of for a children's book. And this is definitely something that people at all ages can read. I would assume that in translation also quite a bit of stuff would get lost there, but even if like half of it gets lost, it's still an amazing book. So the NeverEnding Story. The next one I went a bit back and forth on. I initially rated it lower, but after it sunk in, I was like, this is actually a work of genius. It's One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which I also read all in one day to get the full experience. And yeah, just this whole idea of, given this first-hand account of living in a gulag, which is probably one of the worst living situations you could ever be in your life. Like, it doesn't get a lot worse than that, I would say. And just the idea of writing about a good day. Like this guy, Ivan Denisovich, he's having a nice day. Like, good things happen, and it still gives a detailed, historically accurate account. It is just, it's just fucking mind-blowing. I guess the Gulag Archipelago is also on my reading list, but that is like, how much is that? It's like thousands of pages, so that's something for the far future, but and also like the historical relevance of this guy, of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and just like a milestone of Russian history and maybe even of world history, which I think for the Russian classics, this one probably doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. Next up, we got Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran, a very, very surprising 5-star read for me. I didn't think this was gonna be for me. I didn't think I would like the writing style, and it took me a bit to get into. And I also recently talked about this in my November wrap-up video. So I'm probably not gonna go like too deeply, but just the plethora of different concepts and different ideas and experiments that this book attempts and pulls off is amazing. I did also say in the other video that I wish it was a little bit longer, because it could have, a lot of things could be explored more. But another book that made me cry actual tears running down my face. The ending was so incredibly tragic and so incredibly sad, and so like I still think about it constantly. So complex, because it's very sad and very tragic, but it's also kind of like funny and lighthearted and weird at the same time. So I think I felt every emotion that I could feel while reading this book. So what more can I ask for? Next up, Stephen Chbosky, The Perks of Being Wallflower. This also was kind of surprising for me, but I will say Charlie, the protagonist of this book, is my favorite character of all the books I read this year. It's just so wholesome, so relatable, it's sad, it's funny, it's emotional, very, very emotional. And this character of Charlie, he's just such a wonderful kid, he feels everything so deeply, and the concept of writing letters are very, very much like, and it's just an amazing book that I definitely would like to reread. And the importance of being a young teenager and making these impactful experiences that are gonna accompany you throughout your life, and dating your first girl, going to your first parties, smoking weed for the first time, all that kind of stuff, it's in there, and it really made me think about my own teenage years and the positive things and the challenging things about this time of your life. Sadly, this guy didn't really write a whole lot of books. I think he was mostly a screenwriter, or is. Haven't watched the movie adaptation, and I'm not sure I want to, because I kind of just want to leave this as it is. Okay, we're getting into the kind of top 3, I guess. Axel Brauns Kraniche und Klopfer. This guy, last year I read his autobiography, which was kind of written like fiction, but was autobiographical, because he also is an autistic man who lives in my city, actually. And he also wrote some fiction books. I think he wrote another one, and he wrote this one. And it's quite similar. It's about a young girl who grows up with a mother that is a hoarder, and a younger brother, and how her life is like. And it's also, man, it's so sad. It's a lot of sad books, I'm just now realizing. But yeah, how she finds solace, how she finds escape, how she deals with her life and other people, and also to have that childlike feeling of not even really realizing what is going on, and not even realizing what situation you are in, and how people judge it and stuff. It's just, yeah, an amazing book. The writing style is very particular. Definitely not for everybody. Very not really childlike. I don't know. He uses a lot of made up words and stuff like that. So I can imagine that this is not for everybody. But also to have like places in the city that I live in and that I know mentioned in this book, it's very magical and very cool. So yeah. Then the probably top 2 of this whole year. Funny enough, I read them back to back, and one of the first book related videos I made on this channel, where I tried to read as many short books as possible in a week. And yeah, we got Die Taube by Patrick Süskind. This is the guy that wrote their Perfume. But this book is very, very similar, but also very, very different. The feel and the overall writing style is very similar, but it's also kind of Kafkaesque, or like it's kind of not Kafkaesque. It's kind of similar to Hermann Unger, who I called the anti-Kafka. It's very internal. It's this guy who's riddled by anxiety, and he worries about absolutely anything and everything, and he just kind of built his little stable life, and then one day he opens his door and there's a pigeon, and he just loses complete control over his whole life. I actually I read this part at an open stage that I went to. I read the part where he meets the pigeon and pees in his sink, which not everybody at that open stage did approve of. But this is just, and you can read it in like a couple hours too. So I'm probably gonna reread this like once a year or something like that, because it's that good. Man, oof. And lastly, we got my favorite book of this whole year, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, in this absolutely beautiful edition, with the very thick paper. Yeah, what can I say? James Baldwin, he's a magician, and hot take, I think he's one of the like top 3 most important authors of the whole 20th century. Arguably, of course, but yeah, like, you know, this book, it's a gay romance set in Paris with an American white guy who's also in a relationship with a woman at the same time, kind of, and he explores his homosexual side, and it's yeah, it's kind of doomed from the start, and it's, man, this book, it's like 150 pages, and the characters feel as complex and as real as if they were in a 1,000-page book. This is how good the characters are, and it's so, it feels so real. It's so emotional. It's so absolutely magical and beautiful that this was the first Baldwin I read, and he instantly became like one of my top 5 authors ever. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. This is also something that I'm definitely gonna reread multiple times, over and over again. And I read another one. I read Beale Street Blues, or I think in English it's called If Beale Street Could Talk. I accidentally bought it in German, but even in German it was still absolutely astounding, and it also almost made me cry. And I think if I had read it in English, I would have bailed my eyes out. So James Baldwin, I cannot stress this enough, is just an absolute genius. So yeah, that's it. This is the essence of my 2024 reading, and thank you for watching. I'm gonna split this whole reading recap in like 3 or 4 parts, and I'm gonna upload them. So see you next year. I hope you have a good New Year's and a good reflective winter time. And I might make a video about my reading plans for next year soon. So see you then. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.